It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Pradeep Khosla. He is the Dean of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon. Professor Khosla, welcome.
Thank you.
You're Dean at a very prestigious school, an IIT alum. I want to take you straight back to India and get your opinion on what it takes to build not just good schools, but a good infrastructure, good teachers. It's a whole dynamic.
Right.
What is your take on it?
So, that's a big problem. It takes a lot of things. And when I was going to school, as in when I was going to IIT, it was clear we had great teachers, it was clear we had great infrastructure. But I think over time what has happened is because of significant wealth generation in India over the last 20 years, the demand for education, which should have been there 50 years ago, has just gone up tremendously. And the country has not kept up with the production of PhDs and faculty members that is needed. The country also is investing a lot in new infrastructure right now, but it's trying to do it overnight, and it's not that easy. So I think we're going through some growing pains right now, but in 10 more years, I think it's going to be in very great shape.
So one of the complaints that one often hears is, now that you have expanded to 16, but before there were only 7 IIT campuses, and you have 300,000 plus students competing for this limited number of seats. So unless you are an absolute nerd, a bookworm, after your high school, you go to those prep schools, as you just said, you come out as a nerd. So the contributing factor isn't as much to the development of the economy. So my take is, you guys have done tremendously well. You went to the same schools, went through the same process. What do you think has changed now, which actually needs further change?
Right. So now I'm going to just talk about what I think is true. It may not be true based on facts, right? So I think the acceptance rate in an IIT is about 1 to 2%. Was the case in 1975 when I went in, and it's probably the case even today. It's not changed by a factor of 10. So relatively speaking, the competition is pretty as much. In absolute numbers, the numbers have gone up from like 80,000 students taking the exam to 600,000 students taking the exam. That's one. Secondly, it's okay to say that we were nerds when we went there, but just tell you a personal story. So when I first took the exam in 1974, my rank was like, I don't know, 1100 and something. And when I went to the admissions place, they said, you're going to get like agriculture or mining and I said, I'm not interested, I want to do physics. So I just walked away from the admission. I went home and my parents were really upset. I guarantee you today, no student would walk away saying he's not going to do something he or she's not interested in, right?
Yeah.
And this is the problem. So when I took the exam again next year, I had only about 1 month of classes, and that's it. Now, my nephew is in a school where it's 2 years of IIT preparation, and I think this is ridiculous. I think it is totally ridiculous that one should prepare for an entrance exam with a 2% probability of success and give up 2 years of your life. It does not make sense to me. From the IIT system, it doesn't make sense, and from an individual perspective, it doesn't make sense. I think we need to rethink this.
The other complaint is the education system in India is so out of reality that you teach students something that is not practical for them. So the moment they step out and try to find a job, they get jobs based on their schools or degrees, but they are not relevant to the current economic environment. So
right.
There's a big disconnect.
There is a big disconnect, and the reason I believe that there is a disconnect is because people educate and provide skills to students based on the way they were taught, and under the assumption that fundamentals of mechanical engineering have not changed, so why not keep on teaching the same thing? Which may be true, the laws have not changed, but the context has changed. What used to be non-existent 30 years ago are now new fields of pursuit that we have to understand. So the point I'm making is, I think the government has to invest in research in these institutions. Research does 2 good things: create technology and keep up with the current technology in terms of skills of the faculty. And these, when delivered to the classroom, result in a better student coming out.
How do you help your students at Carnegie Mellon? The courses are relevant, the content is relevant, and then matching up with the right job placements?
So it happens multiple ways. So number one is our professors teach only 2 courses a year, 1 course a semester. So that's not much workload compared to what professors in IIT have. Secondly, they're all involved in research, one way or the other, getting grants, and that keeps them current, connected to industry, connected to the government, connected to broad-based national strategy or where things are going. Thirdly, as dean, I have not mandated but encouraged the inclusion of a research experience in a 4-year undergraduate program. So 70% of my students in engineering at Carnegie Mellon have at least 1 research experience. And by research experience, I mean they work with a professor in his or her lab, working on problems that PhD students are working on. And that opens up their mind. It tells them that they're capable of thinking a lot more than they do. And lastly, in the course of 4 years, just about every class we have has a project experience in the class, starting from the freshman year, which means they learn how to work with other students, which means they learn how to define open-ended problems and constrain them so there's a solution, which means they have to go out and understand what the context is in the current environment.
When students who are not US born and raised come to you, and I'm sure there are many who come and from many developing economies, do you see them different, and if you do, in what context compared to the students from here?
So I do see them differently, especially at the graduate level. And the biggest difference is, so we pick for our PhD program top students from IITs. I think the biggest difference is that the students who have graduated from even a B+, a reasonable educational institute from the US, have a style of inquiry that's more open, and they're more independent, and they're not focused on trying to solve end of the book, end of the chapter type of problems. They're used to looking at problems in an open-ended way and then constraining them, right? So Indian students typically, it takes about 6 months or a year, and then they're fine, because now they're used to this system of education.
Now I want to take you back to 1975 to
1980.
80, the campus years. You are a dean and professor now. I'm sure the pranks played by students aren't as much here compared to your days at the campus. So I'm trying to pick something out from your past. If you'd like to share with us an anecdote.
Actually, I don't know if I have an anecdote, but I can tell you. So I have not been to IIT recently, right? But I can tell you, ragging in Kharagpur was the absolute worst. I mean, it was the worst possible experience for 30 days. Man, at times I felt like, maybe I should just not worry about this crap and just go home. But I hung in there. And looking back, now it looks like everything was done with the right intention, even though there were some deviance in the mix out there. Looking back, it was a learning experience, but I think it could have been a better experience, and I could have learned the same thing instead of the way it was, right? So that's one. The second, I think the friendships I formed out there for 5 years. Kharagpur was just a spectacular place. I used to think of it as a gurukul, where it was in the middle of nowhere, very calm, very serene, and we would spend days and hours talking politics, philosophy, science, technology. And I think those were the best 5 years of my life. I'd give anything to get them back.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you.